Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you're all well wherever you are and whatever you're up to. I'm Lauren, and in this video I'm coming to you from my shop, Guthrie and Ganny, to share with you the latest project that I have been making, which is what I'm wearing just now, using some of the beautiful embroidered mesh fabric that has come in as part of all of our new fabrics for the autumn and winter season. And it's a bit more of an unusual fabric, so I thought it would be really good to show you what I've made with it, give you some advice and tips for sewing with it and options for lining it as well. So when I come to plan my own dressmaking projects, sometimes I feel like it's the fabric that comes first. Obviously I see a lot of fabric coming into the shop, or sometimes it's the pattern, but in this instance it was definitely the fabric. As soon as I saw it, I absolutely loved it, and I knew that it was really unusual. I don't often see things in these really nice colour combinations, and I knew that it would be a lovely fabric to get in for the shop. So we do have a decent amount of this particular fabric available, but depending on when you're watching this video, it might have sold out. I did get all of the stock that was available from our supplier, so unfortunately we can't get any more, but we do have a fair amount of it available in the shop at the moment. So I will put a link to the blog post that goes along with this video in the description, and in there you'll find links to the fabric and the patterns that I mentioned as well. If you are watching this video in the future maybe and it's just giving you some inspiration, I mean, you can get other embroidered mesh fabrics that are out there, so hopefully it just gives you a little bit of inspiration and some tips and ideas for how you can use this fabric in your dressmaking projects. So first of all, let's talk about the fabric specifically and the sort of different characteristics that it's got. So we've got it in two colourways, the one that I'm wearing just now, and then there's also this more sort of like deeper kind of, it's quite autumnal vibes in this one. This one's got lovely sort of greens and a nice dark plummy colour, lovely ochre as well, and then a sort of taupe colour too. So the main backing fabric is a very lightweight black mesh. So it is black, but it is very, very fine and lightweight. It's also quite sort of stretchy and bouncy, like it does move around a fair bit, but because the embroidery on it is quite dense, I would say that that does provide a certain level of stability to it, like more so than if it wasn't there. So you know, you can see on the top that I've made, you know, it is like a fairly, it's quite a sort of loose fitting kind of boxy top, and I feel like it holds the shape of that quite well. And I think that's just because of the density of the embroidery that's on it. Now, what's maybe like a little bit more unique about this fabric is that at one of the selvages, you can see it's got this embroidered sort of scalloped edge to it. And when you actually look at the design of the embroidery, it's kind of coming up from there. It's like that bottom scalloped, that scalloped edge is like the bottom of the design. So it means when you come to cut your pieces out, you have to cut them out basically at 90 degrees to the selvage, or to that embroidered line, rather than cutting it out parallel to it like you normally would. So you're buying fabric by the length. We sell it by the metre. You can buy in 10 centimetre denominations. But what you have to consider when you're working out how much fabric you need to get of this for a particular project, you're considering really what is the width of your pattern pieces, because even if you don't decide to use that little scalloped edge as part of your hem, so on this top and on the skirt that I've made as well, I've used that scalloped edge as the sort of finished hemline. But you don't have to do that. You can just create a narrow turned hem. That's what I did on the sleeves here. But you would still have to cut it out at 90 degrees to what is effectively the selvage of the fabric, because of the design and the way that the way that the sort of foliage kind of grows up, if you like. So yeah, you need to consider the width of your pattern pieces when you're working out how much fabric you need. So you would need, you know, however wide your front section is, however wide your back section is, and then depending on the length of what you're making, it might be that you would be able to get your sleeves out of the kind of top part of that section. So you would just need to buy the width of your garment twice, if you like. Which is what I did for this particular top here, and then because my sleeves were short, I was then able to get it out of the sort of the section above that. So I cut my bodices out, and then the sleeves were on top of it. So that is just something to bear in mind, that it's a little bit different than what normal fabric is like, or how you would normally kind of work out what the fabric requirements are of your project. So for my top, I chose the Helens Closet Ashton top, which was a pattern that I already had in my pattern stash at home. I'd made the garment several times before, and I wanted something that was just going to be really nice and simple that I could wear over a vest top. So I'm wearing it over a true bias Zoe tank top, which is made out of our meat milk ribbed derby 10 slope jersey. It's a really lovely fabric for a garment like a vest, and it just means that I didn't have to worry about lining it or anything. So I made a size 6 of this pattern, and I used, I think it was about 1.3 or maybe like just under 1.3 meters of fabric that I used to make this. So that was cutting out the bodice, kind of the front bodice side by side to the back bodice, so that I could have this little scalloped edge along the bottom. So I did the cropped version of that pattern, and because you've already got the finished hemline at the bottom, if you're using that scalloped edge, then that can obviously then affect what length the pattern is. And I wanted to wear it with high-waisted trousers, and I wanted it to be quite short and kind of boxy and cropped. So I actually shortened it by about an inch. Now on the Helens Closet Ashton top, it does have a hem facing, so I was obviously just disregarding that. But it does mean that then obviously it's not got a full hem allowance at the bottom, it's basically got a seam allowance at the bottom. Now this is where, I'll be honest, I shortened it, and then basically I created a fold in the fabric, I lined up the scalloped edges, and then I just placed the pattern on the fold and lined my folded pattern up with like the bottom edge of that scalloped edge there. And then you have to kind of straighten it off, so the hem does curve sort of up and out a little bit to the sides on the Ashton, but obviously because I was using the scalloped edge, you just kind of have it sort of coming straight out. But you can use the center front fold line sort of as your reference point for placing it on. I feel like it's come up a bit short. It's come up shorter than what I intended, but it's okay. You live and learn with these things. But just that's something to be aware of if you're copying exactly what I'm doing and using the same pattern. Is that just remember it's not got a full hem allowance on that top. It's just got the seam allowance there. And yeah, I just shortened mine a little bit too much, but yeah, that's okay. It inspired me to make the skirt, which I'll come on to shortly. So basically I just, cut it out, and then you just trim the net away. So you just cut really, really closely to that scalloped edge, like obviously not the actual stitching, but just on the mesh very close to it. And then your hem is done. Basically, that's all that you do for that. Now, the other piece of advice that I give you in relation to cutting out is that I would suggest using tailor's tacks to mark your notches as opposed to doing little snips. It's quite hard to see the snips in this fabric, and I guess because it's quite a delicate fabric, and you don't want to encourage the embroidery to be fraying or anything like that, then it's better just to use tailor tacks. They're much easier to sort of see later as you come to construct it. So when it actually comes to sewing this fabric, I used a size 70 needle. A standard or a microtex would be absolutely fine, and I just sewed it with a regular stitch length and regular black thread. And I would suggest doing French seams where you can. I did actually manage to do French seams on the inserting the sleeves as well, which I can't actually remember ever having done that before. But it was fine. You have to sort of manipulate the fabric around a little bit. It doesn't press that well just because it's synthetic fabric and the mesh is quite bouncy, so you do have to sort of focus quite a lot on kind of making sure you're using your fingers to like really roll out the seams and like get the shaping right when you're doing your French seams. But I think it worked out pretty good. The darts as well, you just sew the darts as normal, and don't sort of overthink that too much. Just kind of sew them as you would normally sew a dart. And then for the neckline, I changed that to be bias binding instead. So I used just some of our plain viscose fabric to cut a few strips of bias binding, and then I sewed that onto the neckline to finish that off. So almost gives like a bit of a skeleton to the top, because it does make the seams a bit more defined when they're French seams, because there's obviously thicker layers. You could alternatively use an overlocker if you wanted to, but I guess because I was making it unlined and then I knew it would kind of be see-through, I just wanted to make sure that the seams were going to be really nice and they'd look sort of nice and neat. The other thing that I did at the neckline was that I did raise the neckline a little bit from what is in the pattern, just because I'd made other versions of this top before, and I thought, yeah, I think I just want the neckline to be a little bit higher. And I have to admit, it's pretty tight when I'm getting on and off over my head. So I probably shouldn't have really raised it quite as much as I did. I mean, I think I maybe only did it by 3/4 of an inch, but I guess just because it's one of those style of tops that you do pull on and off over your head, and it is in a woven fabric, then there does need to be like a certain amount of ease around the neckline for you to be able to get it on and off. So I end up having to, I've got like a silk scarf, but some sort of satiny scarf would work as well. I basically put that over my head and my face, and then it makes it much easier to pull tight tops on and off over your head, and it also stops your tops getting makeup on them as well. It's a really good tip that I picked up randomly from a changing room in a high street shop years ago. I can't even remember what one it was, but they had silk scarves that you could put on to, I guess, protect their clothes from getting makeup on, but it does make it really easy to get things that are tight fitting on the neck on and off over your head a lot easier. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the different lining options that you can have when you work with this fabric. So as I've mentioned already, I didn't line the top that I made. It's just a completely like see-through top that I'm wearing with a vest top. But the skirt that I made, which is the Named Kerttu, I hope I'm saying that right, skirt, I'll put a little picture up of it anyway. I did line that one. Now, when you do come to line it, and this would be the same for like lining tops or dresses as well, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. So you can either do what I'm going to describe as flat lining. So this is when you cut out the mesh fabric pieces using your pattern pieces, obviously, and you do the same with the lining fabric. And then before you actually do any construction or anything like that, you put the lining fabric with the main mesh fabric so that the right side of the mesh fabric's facing out, and you just baste them together within the seam allowances. So it effectively becomes like one layer of fabric then. So then as you're constructing the garment, you're just treating those two layers as one, and then effectively it's just lined already. So then you make the garment and it is just lined already. So if you were doing that on a garment that say had darts in it, when I've done that before, I've basically hand tacked the two layers together around the area where I'm doing the dart until I sew the dart in, and then obviously the dart sort of attaches the two layers of fabric together as well. So you could do that for all your pattern pieces, or maybe if you were making a top, you could do it for your bodice pieces, but not for the sleeves. Obviously you've got the hem situation to sort out as well. So actually I think if you were wanting to use that scalloped border at the bottom, really what you would have to do is before you attach your lining to your outer pieces, say on the front and back bodice, I would probably say to hem the lining piece at the level that sort of sits just kind of up a little bit from where the finished hemline is of the scalloped edge. So it's basically already hemmed before you come to construct it as well. So yeah, that's another thing to sort of think about. Otherwise, if you weren't using the scalloped border, again, you would just be treating the two layers as fabric as one, and then you just be turning them both back and then hemming them, either top stitching it in place or hand sewing it or whatever. So that would be what I described as flat lining. And then the other option is basically where it's kind of like you make two. So you make your garment and the main outer mesh fabric, you make the garment and the lining fabric, and then you have to attach them. So if it was a dress or a top, typically you would attach them at the neckline. So it would mean that the two would just sort of be sewn and like hemmed and everything kind of independently of each other, and then they literally just come together at the neckline. So it might be that you could bind them together at the neckline, you could sew them with the right sides facing, and then, you know, clip it and press the lining to the inside and understitch it, and that would sort of hold them together. And then you can just do some like little hand stitches maybe at key parts, like maybe underneath the arm or at the side seam, just to hold the two layers together. But essentially they are like two separate garments effectively that you're kind of, you know, putting together as one. So when I made the skirt, I basically did a combination of two. So the main skirt pieces are totally separate. So it's got like, this skirt's got 2 tiers, so like an upper panel and a lower panel. So I made the mesh outer fabric version, and then I made the lining version. But then for the waistband, I did flat line it. So the waistband on this particular skirt is basically made up of 4 pieces. So you've got 2 bits for the front and 2 bits for the back. So I cut out the lining fabric for that. So I had 2 lining of the black viscose, 2 lining for the front, 2 lining for the back, but then in the mesh fabric I cut 1 back and 1 front, and then I basted the mesh fabric to one of the black lining viscose pieces within the seam allowance, so then that was effectively 1 bit of fabric, and then I just treated that as one, and then I constructed the waistband. I did actually construct it a bit differently from what it said in the instructions, just because I felt like, I don't know, I guess maybe when you've been sewing a long time, you just get your own ideas of how you want to do things. And I also didn't want it to become like too bulky, like on the inside of the casing where the elastic is. So I basically have like effectively like a raw edge, which I then overlocked on the inside of my skirt. And so I just left a hole to feed the elastic through by not sewing it all totally on, whereas in the instructions you'll see if you make this pattern, it tells you to leave a gap basically in the side seam, and I didn't do that because I just felt like it would be a bit fiddly and I wasn't really sure how sort of stable this fabric was going to be and everything, so I kind of made up my own method of doing it there. But I think it still works really well, and I think it looks good from the outside anyway, which is the main thing. But I'll show you a little close-up clip of what it looks like anyway. So again, you need to bear in mind the length that you want it to have, because if you're using that scalloped border at the bottom, then obviously if you don't take off the hem allowance, then it can sort of affect that a little bit. So I'd made the dress version of this pattern before, and on the dress it does sit quite high as well, and I actually wanted it to be quite high-waisted because I'd made my top a bit too short. But basically I guess the kind of look I'm going for is a bit like it's a dress, but it's not. It's actually 2 separate pieces, because yeah, I probably could just wear it with jeans, but I just feel like I would want it a little bit longer. But anyway, it's fine. I've got a lovely sort of fake dress out of it, which is actually 2 pieces, that I'm really pleased with. So other suggestions of patterns that you could use for this fabric are the Sew House 7 Remy Raglan. I was really thinking about using that one, but then in the end I went for the Helens Closet Ashton. And I think also the Merchant & Mills Florence top could work quite nicely as well. I'm wondering whether maybe instead of the buttons at the back, maybe you would just have like instead of like a button placket, maybe you would just have like a sort of opening with maybe one little button at the top with a little thread loop or something. I'm not sure how it would work with sort of buttonholes, and unless of course you were flat lining it, then you'd have the stability of the lining fabric there. The Florence top is quite full, it's very gathered, but I think it would look really cool in this fabric, very dramatic. So that's another idea. Or for a skirt, the Sew Over Ava skirt is quite a classic. It's just like a really sort of simple skirt, and I did do a tutorial on that as well. I'll put a link to that in the description to this video. I did do a video and a blog post on adding a lining, well, to any skirt really, but it was the Ava skirt that I used as an example. But yeah, just like a basic sort of simple straightish A-line skirt I think would look nice as well. And then in terms of dresses, you could use the Avid Seamstress Day dress. So it's just quite a simple sort of like more fitted bodice, got a gently gathered skirt section, and you could line it but then not line the sleeves. I think that would look quite nice as well. So hopefully that gives you some pointers of different things that you could use this gorgeous fabric for. I think it's really nice if you want something that's a little bit sort of fancy, or maybe you've got some parties to go to at the festive season, and you can make yourself something nice for that. So I hope you found that useful and it's given you lots of ideas and inspiration. If you do need any help or advice at all, the G&G team and I are always more than happy to help. So you can email us, you can call us, you can leave a comment on this video as well if you want to. If you need a quick answer to anything, it's always better to email or call. But yeah, feel free to leave any questions or comments too, and I shall try and get round to answering them. But thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, just remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. And I'll see you next time. Bye.